Hi everyone, Shabbat Shalom. I am Rabbi Greg. I use he, him pronouns, and welcome to our inaugural Shabbat Torah study. So we will meet every Thursday. Sorry, let's try that again. We'll meet every Saturday on Shabbat morning at 9 o'clock Mountain Time, where we will look at the weekly Torah portion. And what we'll be using is this source sheet that I put together in either a video or a live stream on Torah Tuesday. So we have a great portion to talk about this week. It is called Beshalach. It is the portion with the crossing of the Red Sea. It's also known as Shabbat Shirah because after we crossed the Red Sea, we sang. We sang Shirah as song, so we sang the Song of the Sea. But we are going to be looking at something slightly different today. We are going to be focusing earlier, and I'm going to bring up the share now, where we'll look at this source sheet. Would you folks like me to share the link to the source sheet as well so you can kind of pull it up and look at your own, or you just want to work from the share?
A link would be nice.
Yes, it would be very nice.
Okay. Okie doke. So here is the link to the source sheet. Okay, and we'll have this is not a product placement, but we will have a special shout out to Safaria. I have my Safaria mug. It says first, but first some Torah. Speaking of which, let's start with the blessing for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Divine One, who has given us the opportunity to study and learn from Torah. Okay, so would someone like to read kind of this first section from Exodus 13:17? We are just setting the stage. This is the Exodus. The people have just left Egypt. The plagues have ended fairly recently, within the last week or two. Pharaoh said, "Okay, you can go." So, may I have someone unmute and read Exodus 13:17, please?
Now,
I
when
will.
Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although it was nearer. For God said, the people may have a change of heart when they see war and return to Egypt.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, what is it that what's going on here? Why is this what are we seeing in this happening in this verse?
The people were already, they were at a pretty low point spiritually,
Yeah.
leaving Egypt. And so I think that God did not want them to see more difficulties on the way, initially on the way to the promised land. So he sent them a different direction.
Yeah, thank you, Anita. Beautiful. I love that. It's like, yeah, these people had hard times. Let's not go to a land of the Philistines, a hostile people. They may just get scared and turn tail and return to Egypt. Okay, someone else want to read 13:18?
So God led the people round about by way of the wilderness at the Sea of Reeds. Now the Israelites went up armed out of the land of Egypt.
Okay, so what's happening here then? This is just a direct continuation of 13 of the prior verse.
I was kind of wondering where they got their weapons. Did
Yeah,
they grab them from the Egyptians on the way out?
it's a really good question. I was kind of wondering the same thing. It said that when people left, they were given gifts by the Egyptians. Basically, they took a lot of wealth from the Egyptians in terms of gold and silver and cloth and other things. And I guess apparently they picked up some weapons along the way. Okay, now we're going to skip ahead, and here Moses is taught, and this is all just kind of our background for the main discussion that we're going to have today. And so then this is God speaking to Moses in 14:2. Could someone read this, please?
Tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp before Pharaoh, between Migdol and the sea. Before Baal Zephron, you shall encamp facing it by the sea.
Right, so they were kind of heading through the desert, and God says, okay, wait, stop, turn around, go back, and go to this one spot here with your basically facing the sea, but essentially they have their back to the sea. There's the sea, and then there's kind of the desert. Okay. And then the divine continues in the next verse.
Pharaoh will say to the Israelites, they are astray in the land. The wilderness has closed in on them.
Right. And so then Pharaoh's going to notice, oh, wow, these people have just kind of put themselves right next to the sea, and they're vulnerable there. Okay. And then in 14:14,
Then I will
And
stiffen Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, that I may gain glory through Pharaoh and all his host. And the Egyptians shall know that I am Hashem, and they did so.
okay. So, and they did so. I think what that means is the Egyptians did start pursuing the Israelites. Okay, so here we'll have our first discussion. And as I stated, these verses kind of set the scene. So, what is happening? And in this narrative, what might we think are the divine motives? And why were the Israelites told to encamp with their backs to the sea? Do you want me to keep this up or can I take this down while we discuss?
It doesn't
Um,
matter.
yeah, it doesn't matter either way. If you narrowed your browser window, it might just be more text instead of half white. I don't know if that matters.
I can try it, but that was kind of what I was talking about earlier, where it has like, you know,
Oh,
me as the
right.
author, it's like
Because of
that.
the new format. Got it. Never mind.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't know if I'll, yeah. So anyway, I'm going to try to stop the share. We'll just see how this goes. I can always reshare. So what's going on here? The scene has been set. What do we
God
think?
wanted to show his glory. He wanted to show Pharaoh and the Israelites exactly what he could do.
Yeah, it seems the text certainly says that. I think the divine is pretty transparent with the divine's motives. It's like, okay, we're going to set this up, and you thought these other signs and wonders and the plagues were impressive. Well, now we're gonna have the capstone. What else? Any other things that you observe about this? And any concerns or objections? Any other observations about this scene?
I mean,
well, if go ahead.
go ahead, Anita.
I was going to say if the Israelites were facing the sea, it only gives them trepidation because they have no idea how they're going to cross the sea.
Yeah, yeah, good point. It's like there's probably most of us have seen these videos of Kilauea erupting in Hawaii with these huge like fountains of lava. And this eruption's been going on for decades. And there's a picture, and at one point, there was a road going along the sea, and the lava came and covered it. And I've been to the spot, and you may have seen the picture where the road's going, and there's this stop sign, and then there's just lava in front of you. There's like nowhere to go. So hey, oh, we're going to the land of milk and honey. Wait a minute. He turned around and went this way, and there's nothing but the sea in front of us. That's okay, camp here. All right.
Well, and if you keep the sea to your back, you're safer. That's a
Yes,
better idea because if you're facing the sea, anybody can sneak up on you easier.
Right.
It's
Right.
very unlikely that, like the fish are going to come out of the water and attack you in the middle of the night. So
excellent
if
point.
they're already
Yes.
feeling insecure, the sea at their back is the best idea.
Yeah, so maybe they felt safe and secure. Although I call it their backs were to the sea. It actually says camp facing the sea, but either way, a camp's a camp, you're kind of right there with the desert on one side and the sea on the other. Anything else before we continue? All right, so here we are. Wow, boy, it's great not to be a slave anymore. Here we're going along, and unbeknownst to the Israelites, it also said that God has stiffened Pharaoh's heart. Let's just talk about that a little bit
Yeah,
because,
so I want to say it was Naomi who was saying, God is doing this to show his glory.
yeah,
And and this was something we talked about in the Thursday Torah class was it sounds like God is being very manipulative
yeah,
and trying to show everybody, Pharaoh may be pretending that he's a god and everything, but I'm actually the one who can control everyone in this scenario if I want to.
yeah.
Yes.
So there's a lot of different ways to analyze Torah. So let's put ourselves in the historical mindset of when this was written about 2,500 years ago. It was certainly written by people. What was the model of power that was prevalent in the world then?
Who controlled the sea controlled the world.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so he took them to the sea to show them, I'm God over the sea. There is no God but me.
right. And what was Pharaoh's role within Egypt?
He thought he was God.
Yeah, everybody thought Pharaoh was a god, or at
Yes.
least that's how it's portrayed.
Yeah.
So you could look at this as like, hey, this is a play where we're going to show that there is only one God. There's more powerful gods. There are no other gods. There's just one God. And even if you do believe this person's your God, they're in for a huge shocker. I'll add to this that the only kind of power model was these sort of dynastic type, it's one central powerful figure, and the more you powerful you showed you were, the more people were willing to obey you. And
And
so,
pre and pretending you're a deity or even a demigod.
yeah, absolutely. But here, I think that this was also the target audience for this book were the Israelites, the early Jews, and it wanted to show them that, hey, it's not people that's all powerful, it's God that's all powerful. And so that's kind of the model of kind of power in the world and decision making in that time. This was even before democracy in Greece. This was like there was no other model of anything. So I might offer that that's a little insight into the mindset of the authors as well. Okay, so now we're really getting to the action. We're going to skip ahead 6 verses. And may I have someone read this, please?
As Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites caught sight of the Egyptians advancing upon them. Greatly frightened, the Israelites cried out for help to Hashem.
Great. Okay. So one of the things that I'd love to do is to use the cantillation the trope, the chanting marks to help us interpret the story. So it says, Ufaro, he grieve. Okay, so this cantillation mark, that's actually like a stop. So this is like a whole thing. And Pharaoh drew near, and then it's Vayisu B'nai Yisrael et Einehem Vihine Mitzrayim Naso Acharechem. So it's, and the children of Israel raised their eyes, and here were the Egyptians. So it adds a little bit of drama. Like, hey, let's do some fishing. Oh, I wonder where God's going to send us next. Whoa, my God, there's the Egyptians with chariots and like the whole, the elite of the Egyptian army is what we skipped over and what we described. And so total shock, total surprise. And so then how do the Israelites respond?
They cried out.
Yeah, they cried out for help. And that's like this, the translation in Sepharia says they cried out, but this verb is actually crying out for help. It wasn't just like mindless screaming. It was like,
Yes.
come save us. We're in some trouble here. Okay. And then something interesting happens. So what do we see in the next verse?
And they said to Moses, "Was it for want of graves in Egypt that you brought us to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, taking us out of Egypt?"
Okay, great. So what do you see in verses 10 and 11?
They're full of fear. Um, and like Anita said, they had been taken down so far. I mean, they had lived their life in fear. So
Mhm.
going out into the wilderness, they're still showing that fear. They
Yeah,
need to believe God.
right. So they're
And at this point,
totally
they're just crying out. I'm sorry,
right.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. And they're crying out and they cry out for help. But then what do here? They do something
They
different.
complain to Moses,
Yeah,
"Are we going to die?"
yeah. And so does that strike you as weird at all? That, you know, which is it? Is it you're crying out to God for help, or are you just blaming Moses?
I think they weren't trusting yet.
Maybe it's both.
Yes.
They weren't
Yeah.
yet trusting.
Yeah.
They had been enslaved, and so to build back, it takes time then to trust that you're really free.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think Anita is right. I think they're kind of in this like grief, trauma, shock
Yes.
combination. And slavery was slavery, but it was a somewhat stable environment. And now
Mhm.
it's okay, so you're telling us that he's telling us to just wander around in a circle? Like, what are we doing now?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And as we were just saying, also, this seems like what God was setting up, right? The divine said, well, I'm going to make a big splash, so to speak, pun somewhat intended. And but for the Israelites, they're like, hey, we're going this way. You told us to come back. You set the camp here, and now, oh my God, the Egyptians have shown up. Okay, so let's go. We're going to skip one verse. Verse 12, it's just kind of more of the same, more piling on Moses. Okay, and then here is Moses's response.
But Moses said to the people, "Have no fear. Stand by and witness the deliverance of," is that Hashem?
Yeah.
Yes.
"He will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you will never see again."
Okay, so And that Moses, this is the last verse we're going to look at, and then we'll start looking at commentators. But Moses, what's the answer that Moses gives?
He's trying to reassure them that God will deliver them, and they won't have to deal with the Egyptians going forward.
That's right. This is the last chapter of the Egyptians. Okay, so before we start looking at commentators, let's just kind of stop here. Anything you are noticing or observing that we haven't talked about, or any, also, we're going to get into a little bit of tie-in with the modern world later, but do you see any tie-in? Does this have any relevance to you in your life today or in the world today?
I mean, in a microcosm kind of way, this is how I'm feeling with my medical disaster right now,
Mm,
of just wandering in the desert, especially with, he's giving them manna, right? You have this one food source on a schedule, and I'm on a
mm,
medical diet every 3 hours. So there's that. I'm very, very grateful, but wow, I'd love to eat something different.
yeah, I hear you, Annie.
I think we've always all have been to, I know I can say I have been to a point in my life where I did not see any way out.
Mm,
Um,
Mm.
and God always, and I would start grumbling and complaining. What am I going to do? How am I going to get, out of this situation? But God always delivered,
mm.
always. So,
For that. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing that.
yes.
All right, so let's see what the commentators have had to say. So, the first commentator we're going to look at is Rashi. Rashi is perhaps, or certainly one of the most famous, one of the most prolific Torah commentators, also commentated on other books of the Bible, also commentated on the Talmud. He lived in France in the 11th century. An interesting fact, he wrote a lot in ancient French, and French scholars actually study Rashi because it's one of the biggest and best examples of medieval French that's around. So, and I think Rashi was also a winemaker. So there you have it.
He also
So
studied in Worms, Germany.
excellent.
Big yeshiva there called the Rashi Center.
Cool. Um, so in bold, this comes up, this is repeating the phrase in the Torah that Rashi is commenting on. So this was and Pharaoh grew close. And we're going to see a few people talk about this hakariv, this particular word. Why was this word done in this way? Okay, so it should have been written Ufaro Karav, and it's Ufaro Hakariv. And so, can someone, after the Hebrew, can someone pick up from there and read, please?
And Pharaoh came near. What is I'm sorry, I'm having trouble seeing it on my screen. It should have been written this way. And Pharaoh came near. What is the force of the hip hill he caused to come near? He made himself come near. He forced himself to go of them as he had arranged them.
Right, to go in front of them as he had arranged with them. So,
So, quick question. Does Safaria show Rashi also in ancient French? Or was
not
he
that I know.
specifically writing this in Hebrew?
This was so this is how it's presented. This is kind of where it was written in Hebrew. So
Okay.
he wrote in Hebrew, as we see up here, and then Safaria is providing this translation.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
so this he feel, they're making a big deal of this he feel. Well, what does that mean? Well, he feel is one of the tenses in Hebrew. and I am not a grammarian in English or Hebrew or anywhere else, but we know that there's in English, there's things like the past and the future and the conditional, and there's no um, direct equivalent to he feel in English, but what my teacher used to call is he said it's like a causative tense, like he caused them to come near. Or if a parent makes their kid clean up the room, it might be he caused the kid to clean up the room, that kind of thing. So instead of just saying Pharaoh came near, it's like he caused to come near. And Rashi earlier said that Pharaoh agreed with his army that he would go in the lead. So maybe that's his interpretation. Is there another reason? Like, why did Pharaoh kind of have to force himself to do this? Are there other interpretations we might think of?
Um, Maybe God was trying to push his heart in a certain direction and he was fighting against it.
Yeah. Or whether or not, yeah, maybe he's like, God, I've gotten my butt kicked multiple times by going up against the Israelites. Do I really want to do this again? No, no, this is it. This time Lucy's not gonna pull the ball away. I'm gonna kick the football, it's gonna happen. Okay, so I always think that's just so interesting. That's why I find Torah study so fascinating. You can look at a single word, and because of the tense, because of like this little inflection, we might pull out an additional interpretation. I mean, all of these are interpretations, and I'd love to call Torah study the world's oldest book club. I mean, we are now in conversation with Rashi, who lived almost 1,000 years ago. I'm like, yeah, maybe you're right, Rashi, but maybe it was just Pharaoh was like having second thoughts, but didn't want to lose face in front of his army. Okay. Ibn Ezra was in Spain. He lived about 100 years later. Um, what did Ibn Ezra have to say?
And when Pharaoh drew near, when Pharaoh caused his camp to draw near, the verb ikriv is always transitive in scripture.
Right. So again, it's looking at this he feel, and
Ikriv.
he
Ikriv. Yeah.
grieve. That's right. And so he's saying it's transitive. So I put in a definition of a transitive verb. And it's a verb that contains or acts in relation to one or more objects. Sentences with a transitive verb require a noun that receives the intention of the action of the verb. So here it's saying Pharaoh caused something, and he says he caused his camp to draw near. So how does this, um, how does that differ from Rashi's interpretation of Hikriv? So Rashi thought he was causing himself to go near. Ibn Ezra thought he was causing who to go near?
His army, right? His army.
Yeah, yeah. And so what might that tell us about how his army felt about this?
It probably wasn't a great idea.
They had seen what God had already done in Egypt.
That's
They
right.
had lost their firstborn in every household. So they probably didn't want to go. He was forcing them to go.
Yeah, yeah. And that totally makes sense too. The army itself has lost people who were firstborn.
It's,
The horses pulling the chariots, the firstborn horses all died. They all lost family members, their own children, whomever. And now you want us to go up against them again? Yeah, it sure looks enticing. This pack of women and children and ex-slaves sitting with their backs to the sea, but I don't know. Should have just left well enough alone. Okay, so now we've had, three interpretations. Our interpretation that um, of what Pharaoh causing himself to come. Rashi saying Pharaoh was going in front of the army, and Ibn Ezra saying he had to kind of really put the hammer down and force the army to go. Okay, now we got a very big long section. So Rambam, also known as Nachmanides, he lived a few hundred years later. He certainly read Rashi and often not only answers Rashi, but talks about, he often calls Rashi uninformed, wrong, dumb. He often disagrees with him. So I don't think he mentions Rashi this time, but this is kind of a big, long reading. So let's take care of it in chunks. So first he repeats what's in the Torah. So can someone um, read the bold or the section in caps?
And they were
And they
sore afraid, and the children of Israel cried out unto the Eternal. And they said unto Moses, because we're there, no graves, because were there no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us to die in the wilderness?
Great, thank you. So that's one of the verses that we skipped. So they are complaining to, I think we skipped that one, but in any event, it's, people are really not happy with Moses. Okay, so then he says something really interesting. And we talked about this point as well. Okay, Annie, I think you would try to read as well. Do you want to continue here?
It does not appear logical that people who are crying out to God to help them should at the same time protest against the deliverance he performed for them and say that it would have been better if he had not saved them.
Okay, so here Ramban is pointing out something that we talked about, but I think he articulates it very well. Well, wait a minute. They're crying out for help and they're protesting against the deliverance, as if it would have been better that they not be saved. So that's
Mm.
a little bit inconsistent. So how does he bring this about? He makes a very important insight.
The correct interpretation, therefore, is that there were conflicting groups, and Scripture relates what all of them did. Thus, it narrates that one group cried to God for help, and another denied his prophet and did not acknowledge the deliverance done for them.
Okay. So what's that mean? What's his point? And somebody else can answer as well.
I mean, it sounds like a classic Jewish thing, right? Like two Jews, three opinions.
Yeah.
But is he subtly, and I know that we haven't really talked about this, but along with the Israelites or the Hebrews, whatever you want to say, there was also a mixed multitude that came out with them. So is he
Mhm.
referring to the heir of Rav?
That is possible.
Good question.
Yeah. So we know that, and often the rabbis will point to that the heir of Rav, they were kind of the rabble. They were kind of maybe they weren't even Israelites, or they were kind of the not great people. So it's possible that this is talking about the heir of Rav. Um, is it also possible that there are multiple groups within the Israelites, or do we think the Israelites were kind of monolithic in their beliefs? Now, Annie's point was it's unlikely, since if we look at how our experience of Jewish people today, you get a lot of different opinions and a lot of uh, conversation, discussion, argument.
Well, and even over 1,000 years ago, they're always arguing with each other anyway.
Yeah,
Like it
yeah.
and
seems
they're
like a long-held tradition.
and their attitude about God. I mean, some people have more faith in God, some people have more trust, some people are more grumblers and complain. And so it could have just been all of them, different groups of people, all having a different attitude about the same thing. You
Yeah.
know, some
Yeah.
people see positive, some people see negative.
Yeah, and what you're both saying, that's kind of my experience with like large groups of people is that they're never of one opinion about anything. And it's like people talk about voting. Well, X group tends to vote for so and so, but X group is not really a group. I mean, they may share one characteristic, but
Yeah.
there's multiple opinions. And so yeah, I think it's easy for us to look at the story and just kind of think that everyone was always on the same page, but I think he's making something pretty insightful. Now, what about this part? There's the group crying to God for help, and then he calls this other group. He says, well, these people are denying God's prophet, so that would be Moses, and did not acknowledge the deliverance done for them. So how is he characterizing these other people?
If you go on down, it says that they were the rebellious at the sea, even at the Red Sea. So they were the ones that were arguing and coming against Moses and the deliverance. We should have just stayed in Egypt, you know.
Yeah. And in a way, it's sort of they're rebelling against the divine.
Yes.
They're rejecting, despite all these plagues and all this stuff, we are not, um, it doesn't say, oh, they were just afraid and paralyzed by their fear and lashing out. It's like, no, they were rebelling. They were
But
people who had not only were not on board with God or were unsure, it's like you're either in God's camp or you're rebelling. That's it. There's no middle ground.
Yeah.
let's see, as you read through this commentary by Rambam, he is making a distinction between the children of Israel, between Israel and the people, which he calls is the multitude. So he
Mhm.
is making that distinction between the others that came out of Egypt along with the children of Israel.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And he even, I think, points out, um, yeah, it says this at the bottom. Wherever it says the people, it's an expression of reproach. And wherever it says Israel, it's one of praise. So it might be, I won't go up and show that in the original. So it could very well be tracking with um, this idea of the Israelites and the heir of Rav. So it certainly could be tracking with that. Um, so I found it kind of interesting. It's sort of up here. We'd skip through this. Um, it's referencing again, it's with this idea that Anita was talking about who is this group that was kind of rebelling. Maybe they were the heir of Rav, maybe there were some of the Israelites. But it's also possible, whether the Arab Rob were Israelites or not Israelites, that they were kind of grumblers from the start, that there were always people that kind of weren't happy. So then it quotes the Psalms. They were rebellious at the Red Sea. And so I actually pulled this out. Our ancestors in Egypt did not perceive your wonders. They did not remember your abundant chesed, which means loving kindness. And that's um, God's chesed, God's kindness, God's compassion and taking care of the people is often referenced in Psalms. It's an attribute of the divine, and it's the divine motivation for doing this. And even these people who rebelled at the sea, we're saved if we go to the next, as benefits God's name to make known God's might. So stepping back, and this psalm looks at a bunch of different incidents in the Bible where someone rebelled or behaved badly, and they were taken care of anyway. But what's going on here? This is another part of the Bible, and what do we see? What's the dynamic? What is the psalm doing here with respect to the Torah? This is probably a little bit obtuse because I'm asking something which maybe you haven't thought of. So I'm just going to tell you what I'm thinking.
Can you repeat the question? Because I was finishing writing a note.
Sure. So the psalm is writing something about an incident that took place in the Torah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Is that the same kind of thing as Rambam or Ibn Ezra or Rashi writing about an incident that took place in the Torah?
When it's the psalmist versus a classic commentator.
Yeah.
It seems like it would be different in a way because one is source material.
We certainly classify them differently, and the Psalm is part of the canon of the Bible. Um, if we were um, Hebrew studies professors and just looking this as text and not as scripture,
Right.
they would call this intertextual analysis. That they would
Okay.
say that the psalmist hundreds of years later was writing a commentary about what happened in the Torah. And what's interesting is the psalmist is only pointing out the people who were rebellious. The psalmist is not pointing out the people who are crying out for help. So it
Mhm.
has flattened whereas the later commentators are looking at these two groups that had different approaches. The psalmist is just taking little bits from different chunks of the Bible and saying, "Oh, you rebelled here, and you rebelled here, and you rebelled here." But God was full of loving kindness and forgave you and saved you anyway, hoping that you would, I might say, and because God is always hoping that people will eventually do teshuvah and return to the good path.
So that makes me think of that famous quote from the story about like, what is hateful to you, do not do unto others. Everything else is commentary.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's a quote from Rabbi from Hillel. Um, so there's a level that we can even look at other parts of the Bible that mention the Torah as sort of a commentary or an elaboration on it. Is that like a uncomfortable idea to you, or an interesting idea, or kind of an irrelevant idea? I'm just curious how that lands for you.
I think it's very interesting. I do think it's relevant.
Yeah, so do I. I agree because it's lifting up God. Um, that's what, yet they were saved. I mean,
Mhm.
Yes.
regardless of what happened, the psalmist is lifting up our Creator.
Yeah,
Because it says, as befits God's name, his name is to be glorious and
right,
holy.
right. Okay. So we'll skip that piece. Um, I'm gonna go. I don't remember keeping these in, but I'm gonna skip over a couple of things. And now we're gonna actually go back. We were up at like, the 14th-ish, 13th, 14th century. Now we're gonna go back to the Jerusalem Talmud, which was probably written, this was probably done in like 500 CE-ish. And so they were looking at this passage and this idea that there were multiple groups, and they actually said, well, they declared that there were four different factions. There weren't just two, there were actually four different factions on the shore of the sea here. So could someone read what they had to say?
Uh, so our forefathers formed four factions on the sea. One said, "Let us fall into the sea," and another said, "Let us return to Egypt." And another said, "Let us fight with them." And another said, "Let us shout against them." To the one who said, "Let us fall into the sea," Moses said, "Stay firm and see the help of the eternal," etc. And to the one who said, "Let us return to Egypt," Moses said, "For as you are seeing Egypt today," etc. And to the one who said, "Let us fight with them," Moses said, "The eternal will fight for you." And to the one who said, "Let us shout against them," Moses said, "And you be silent."
Okay, so this is a little bit of a jump from the kind of stuff that we were looking at here. So what are we seeing? These were definitely the early rabbis who were halakha means, this was actually, there's some sort of law that's going to be derived from this, which we won't get into. But what do you think's going on here? Why might they have said there were four factions?
Because people don't agree with each other.
Yeah. It's like, well, if there's two, why not four? And people don't agree.
Yeah, it's interesting how the first group is like, well, let's just give in to apathy. And the second one is like, let's return to this slavery and abusive existence. Group three is belligerent. And then group four just wants to complain without making a plan for action.
It reminds me a little bit of at the Seder story at the with the wise son and the one who, it's the same kind of,
Hmm.
Yeah, the four questions. Good point.
yeah.
Well, I think it was the four sons also that you were talking about, right? Carolyn, the wise son.
Hmm.
But this was kind of written around the same time as that. So yeah, this is kind
Hmm.
of part of the early rabbi shtick. This is how they looked at things. You create different categories. And then, like again, like the four sons, and here's what you say to people. You know, this isn't as clear as the four sons, but these are all things that Moses said. These are little snippets. Kind of, we read one of those passages where Moses said, "Stay strong," and then Moses goes on for a few more verses that we quit or that we skipped. I mean, so yeah. What
And
else?
this is a lot of the attitude that people have today. You have people that see, God's going to deliver. Then you have people that don't have any hope. And there are people that extreme, they fight. They come out in anger, so it's inside of us. These attitudes are inside of us at different times.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It almost makes me wonder if the rabbis were right. Like, okay, well, let's put ourselves in that place. And what do you think was going on? And how might people have reacted? And these are all like, I don't look at any one of these and go, oh no, people would never do that. As you say, Naomi, it's like, oh yeah, I've either seen people do that or I've been there at one point or another in my own life. And so what do you think of Moses's approach or how the rabbis portray Moses's approach?
Um, I just copy and pasted it into my notes and kind of rearranged it so it was more like an actual conversation.
Okay.
And it's kind of interesting to see it laid out this way of like one said, "Let us fall into the sea," and then there's Moses saying, "Stay firm and see the help of the eternal, let us return to Egypt." Moses says, for as you're seeing Egypt today. Like, okay, does that seem like a good idea? We just left. You remember what it was like, right?
Right.
Um, Let us fight with them. Moses says the Eternal will fight for you.
Hmm.
Like you can trust in him. He got us out. You can
Hmm.
calm down a little. And then with the let us shout against him, Moses just says, you will be silent.
Hmm. Right. At the time when this was written, the Roman Empire was occupying Jerusalem. The temple had been destroyed. The Roman Empire, the Romans oppressed the Jews very heavily. A lot of the Talmud was written to tell people, how do we deal with living under the Roman emperor and living under, these oppressors? So what message do you think they might have been sending the contemporary audience for this?
Have faith and don't do anything that could get you in more trouble than you already are.
Yeah, that was part of the rabbinic agenda. Stop fighting the Romans. They killed 2/3 of the Jewish population. Study Torah, let God take care of this, and be silent and wait for God's help. You know, all commentators were working to interpret the scripture in light of the current situation. So, in our last couple minutes, I also picked this because I think it applies to our current situation. So, what do you see any parallels with kind of the world today? And is there any guidance that we might take from this?
Create a plan instead of just complaining about something,
Yeah,
whether that's being silent or contacting a representative or whatever.
yeah, howling at the moon or just shouting doesn't help.
Well, I think we're seeing a rise in anti-Semitism throughout the world.
Hmm.
So maybe Hashem is preparing us for something, and he still wants us to trust in him. And that's my takeaway. The Eternal will fight for you.
Mm. Yeah. So if we want to look at the theology, you could apply that directly to today. Absolutely. One of the things that I think a lot about is the divisions in our country and the divisions in the Jewish community. And I take a little, and it's painful, especially if, as we came from a time when there were either fewer divisions or the divisions were not as apparent. And they certainly were not as vitriolic and angry as they have become. And it's just a reminder to me that division is nothing new. That I don't know, maybe one of my takeaways is I don't want to be upset about the division in and of itself. Like, I would rather work towards, and this is my take, it's not directly from the text, but my sensibilities towards understanding, and not to just say, well, we're divided and that's awful and this has never happened before and there's nothing we can do about it. Because I think there is something that we can do about it and we need to acknowledge it and also acknowledge it's nothing new. It's not like these people are doing something that's never been done before, which is being divided from the rest of the Jewish community. And unfortunately, we've lived with this in the past, and we're still here. I don't know if that makes any sense, but.
But in that regard, I mean, is it forestall? Some of us believe that there'll be a messianic kingdom. Is it forestalling the redemption? Because we can't unify. We're not unified.
That's not part of my theology, so I don't think I could comment on that.
Okay.
Good question, though. I
Yeah,
hadn't thought of that way.
yeah. Okay, well, we're coming up on 10 o'clock, so we have just a couple minutes left. So I want to just open it up for any final thoughts or questions before we say goodbye.
How do you do Tuesdays by yourself when you create the source sheet and then you put up a video of that? Or could people choose to join you while you're building your source sheet?
So my vision is eventually I actually want to live stream building the source sheet, and so people can kind of join into the live stream and kind of use the chat to comment on it. But I probably won't do a Zoom like this, but I would like it to be kind of a community event. But it's I heard this great term there's a podcast called the Oral Talmud where Rabbi B'nai Lappi and Dan Liebenson, they sit and have a Havruta study of the Talmud, and they call it a fishbowl experience, where you can observe them having this conversation. And so that's how I envision Torah Tuesday, is it'll be kind of a fishbowl experience of me noodling and rabbit holing, and people can maybe comment in the chat, but it's not going to be kind of a collaborative process. Whereas the Shabbat Torah group will be a collaborative exploration of the text that I picked. So, but I'm not quite ready to do the live stream yet. So I will probably just record it for a few more times because it just takes a while to kind of figure out the navigation of all the different parts of Safaria and to have to then navigate the live streaming technology on top of that.
Yeah, I
And then
get
I would
that.
like to live stream this as well, in addition to recording it. But again, I want to go step by step. And the reason I want to live stream is it's just a way to reach more people. It's a way to include more people. And then people who want to sign up for the list and get the Zoom link, they can come and participate directly.
That sounds great.
Well, that's the vision. And I want to thank you all so much for coming today. I hope you have a delightful Shabbat. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you very
Okay,
much,
now,
Rabbi.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye-bye.
Shalom.